Years ago, I ended up recording a band over the course of a weekend. We recorded one song, and when I took the files home to start mixing it, I wasn't really satisfied with the original drum performance, so I replaced it with a different drummer playing different parts. I took those files, put it in the mix session, mixed it together, sounded the way I want. I ended up sending it to the band, and needless to say, the original drummer was pissed. But the song ended up coming out, the band ended up getting signed. The song has nearly 500,000 plays on Spotify, and they have a super big fan base now, so maybe it was the right call. What's up, nerds? My name's Corey Bergeron. You are watching Corey Bergeron Recordings, and we are back with a brand new video. Studio horror stories. Okay, so in my recording career, I have made good decisions, I've made bad decisions, and I've made a lot of decisions somewhere in between. And what I've learned is that when you make a bad decision, the goal is to not make that bad decision again. But another thing that I've learned is, depending on what your unique perspective is, you can see a decision as being the right thing or the wrong thing to do. And this story kind of embodies that, if you will. So let's go back to the beginning, and I'm going to tell you a story. Oh, and before we get into it, I'm going to keep the band and the individuals anonymous in this, just because we're all on good terms. There's no bad blood. I don't want to start any sort of drama or anything like that, and I don't want to paint anyone in a bad light. So yeah, story time. Back to the beginning. So there's this band. This band is a local band, but they seem to be making moves and they seem to be making the right decisions. They've managed to attract management. They've done some tours, and historically they've worked with one producer, and this producer lives out of town, and he's a great producer, does great work, but I thought that if I had the opportunity of working with this band, that we could make something cool together. So I ended up reaching out to their manager, and I say, hey, I'm interested in working with your band. I'm down to do a song with them for free to feel out what it's like to work with the band, what the dynamic's like between the band and myself, and if we make something cool, that's great. The manager approaches the band, lets the band know the band's interested, and then we set up a weekend to work together. Now, if you've been a long-time subscriber of this channel, you've probably heard me rant about the idea of recording drums in a large live room, and I felt like this song could totally benefit from that. And at the time, the only large live room in the city that I had access to charged $60 an hour. So I approach the band, I say, hey, I think we should track drums in a large live room. What's your thoughts? It's $60 an hour, we can do 3 hours, it'll be a total of $180. And they hit me back and they said, we're about to go on tour and we need to save our money. Which I do understand, but I also had the thought of like, okay, there's 5 people in your band, $180 split 5 ways. Doesn't seem like a ton of money to spend on something that's gonna last forever, but at the same time, I do understand where they're coming from. With a couple weeks leading up to when we actually are set to track the song, they send me a demo, and they send me the Pro Tools session to the demo. I remember it had some awesome parts, had a really catchy chorus, and I did what I do. I jump into the demo, I start chopping it up and doing whatever I think the song needs to be the most effective version of the song. And I remember I spent a lot of time rewriting some drum parts just to make sure that, nothing clashed, that the transitions were smooth, and just kind of spruced up some areas. I end up sending this demo back to the band. They are stoked on it. I remember specifically that the drummer said that he liked some of the stuff I did, but he wanted to keep some of the stuff that was originally there. And to that, I said, that's cool. And I remember I sent them back the session, they kind of worked on it a little bit, and then that leads us to tracking. So that leads us to the recording date. So we recorded over the course of a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we recorded the guitars, bass, and vocals first, and we left the drums as the last thing to be recorded, and we tracked the guitars, bass, and vocals to the MIDI drums. So we set everything up to record the drums, and once we started tracking, I immediately realized that the drummer reverted entirely back to the original drum parts that he had written, which was kind of an issue for 2 reasons. One being that I thought that the parts that we worked on together was the best version of the song, so I felt that that was really important that we recorded those parts. But 2, we actually went and recorded the bass, guitar, and vocals to the MIDI drums, which was that hybrid performance that we had written, so there was parts that didn't line up, and it was a bit of a problem. So I addressed it. It wasn't a big deal, and what we did is we ended up just going part by part throughout the song, making sure that we got all the pieces that we needed, and we kind of compromised on parts. And I remember at the end of recording, everyone felt really good about it. It was, everyone was super stoked, and that means up next is mixing time. So I take the files home and I start mixing, and I realize almost immediately that the drum performance has no energy and it makes the entire production feel super lifeless. And I realized the reason why this happened is because the drummer was focused on playing these new parts and playing in time. He wasn't focused on fully performing, so it's kind of an error on both our parts. I didn't catch it, and he didn't have the experience at the time to play with maximum energy, so I was left with a drum track that kind of ruined the entire production. So I spent a couple days trying to mix the track, trying all these different shady things to give the track more energy, and I don't know, I just couldn't. But coincidentally, my friend, who was also assisting during this whole weekend of recording this band, he had just gone home and he tracked drums in his parents' new 3-car garage, and it sounded awesome. It sounded huge, and he's an amazing drummer, so he sent me drums to something completely unrelated, and I was like, yo, these sound sick. Would you be willing to do a pass over the track that we just worked on? I tried to mix in the drums as is, but I can't get them to work. It feels lifeless. And he was a little concerned, but I told him everything was going to be okay. And he ended up sending me a Pro Tools session with 8 different takes, all in different playlists. And I comped between whatever I thought fit the song the best. And I made a new drum take. I plugged those into my mix session, and instantly it gave me what I wanted. The song sounded so much better. It made the guitars feel more energetic. It made the guitars sound like they were recorded in a bigger room. Like the whole track just felt right. Okay, so at this point, I got a problem because I now have a production that I feel confident in, but to get there I had to replace the drummer, and I still haven't talked to the band about this at all. I haven't sent them anything at this point. And now the manager starts putting pressure on me because there's a label that's interested in this band and they want to hear this production. So I gotta send over a mix ASAP. This was my thought process at the time. The reason why this whole project started was because I reached out to the manager and I said, hey, I will work with this band for free with the goal of just kind of feeling out the dynamic of working with the band, you know, because I was doing this for free. If I got fired, there wasn't really that much to lose. I figured it was probably best to serve the production instead of the individuals in the band to kind of show the band what they could sound like. And also, there wasn't really a clear path for this song actually being released. At that point, the band had some music in the vault that was finished, but they were in a little limbo period. They didn't know how that music was coming out. So they already had a couple things lined up, and this was kind of at the end of it. So there was no plans to release this track. So I ended up sending over the mix with the new drums. Now, before I sent the file, I sent the longest message I've probably typed out with my 2 thumbs, and I figured honesty is the best policy. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings here. I understand that it is a sensitive situation, but I just kind of explained the whole thing. Let me paraphrase what I wrote. We tracked the song, I brought the files home, I tried mixing it, I could not get it to work, so I ended up getting my buddy to play drums on it, and it instantly brought the song to life. So I figured it was probably best to serve the production. I understand that this is a sensitive situation. I've never been in a situation like this before, so let me know how you feel about it. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and I don't want to do anything that nobody's comfortable with. So I send that message and I send the mix, and at the time the band was on tour, so I knew that they were all together, and I instantly got 5 red receipts on the message that I sent, and then a full hour goes by without them saying anything. And that was the longest hour of my life. I remember just pacing back and forth, thinking of all the potential outcomes. And eventually, the drummer is the only one that replies, and he says, going to be completely honest here, not happy in the slightest about the whole drum situation. It frustrates me that all the drums were recorded without our knowledge, with parts changed as well. He went on to say a couple other things, but they include names and locations and stuff, so I'm going to keep that private. But basically, he was not very pleased that we did it, and he didn't feel comfortable with releasing the track as is. I replied, fair, in one word, and that is where the conversation sat for weeks, if not months. I remember thinking over the course of those weeks that I kind of soiled the relationship with the band. Oh well, lesson learned. So after, I think it was a month, it might have been a little bit longer, the manager gives me a call and he says, hey, the label's interested, they love the track, they want to release the song that you produced as well as 4 other songs and put it together as a part of an EP, but they want the other guy that produced the other 4 songs to mix the track so the whole thing sounds cohesive. It needs to happen right now. They need the files because it's going to come out in a week and the band's going to go on tour with some big band, and there's going to be a label announced and all that stuff. And that all happened. For a long time, that song off the EP was a really high-performing song on Spotify, which was great, but they've gone on to make more music, and that music has surpassed all of that, and they're making cooler and better music now, which is great. The band's in a good spot. We're all on good terms, which is great. There's no bad blood. And I remember months after this whole situation happened, you know, kind of having a weird feeling like, do they not like me? You know, do they think I don't like them? And then I ended up just kind of talking with them all individually, going to shows and whatnot. We're all cool. There's no bad blood. I think it's part of learning, it's part of growing. They're in a good spot now, I'm in a good spot now. Yeah, so that is a studio horror story. So this brings us to today. Do I still stand by the decision I made years ago? Yeah, Probably. I think it worked out for the best. I think a different solution might be having the original drummer retrack the parts, but at the time I remember it was pressing to get a mix over, and this was kind of like the fastest and easiest way to get it done right. I would probably go about it a little differently. I don't like anyone getting their feelings hurt. That's not what I'm about. So I would probably navigate it a little smoother. I think you gotta do whatever you gotta do to make the production sound as good as possible. Music lasts forever, and we all have music that we've made that we look back on and we kind of cringe at it for different reasons, whether the production sucks or the performance sucks. So we should avoid that. Let's avoid that. Another question, should I have asked permission before I went about, getting another drummer to play drums on the track? Maybe. I think you have to kind of take it as a case-by-case basis. You can see when I originally brought it up to the drummer that he was not very pleased. In this situation and in other situations, sometimes it's best to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, but yeah, who knows? Anyways, it's all history now, and the band is in a good spot, the individuals are all in a good spot, I'm in a good spot, life is good. So that is the first studio horror stories. Believe it or not, I have a lot more of these throughout my career. Hopefully I stop creating more of them in real life and I can just kind of tell you about the ones that I've already experienced, but that is that. So that is basically it for this video. If you plan on releasing music anytime soon, I recommend to use the service DistroKid. It puts your music on all the major online music stores and streaming platforms. Yes, that includes Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, iTunes, all of it. For one small annual fee, you can upload as much music as you want, and you get to keep 100% of your royalties, so it's a good thing. If you plan on signing up, use the link www.distrokid.com/VIP/whatsupnerds, and you'll save 7% when you sign up. It saves you money and supports the channel. Both are good things. If you are trying to improve your mixing, head on over to my Patreon page. For just $3, you can download professional multi-tracks that you can download, you can practice your mixing on, and then if you sign up for the higher tier on my Patreon page, you can also get feedback from me. We can do a one-on-one call, and you can improve your mixing. So if you want to upload music, DistroKid, if you want to improve your mixing, head over to my Patreon. That is basically it for this video. What would you have done if you were in the same situation as me? Would you have replaced the drummer? Would you have talked to the band? How would you have navigated it? That is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Corey Bergeron. Create more, create more, create more, create more.